Well, guys, last night, in fact, I drove halfway to Houston to get two of my granddaughters, Bryn and Ava, and this week is Nana and Papa Camp at our house, and so we've got a whole week planned of a lot of stuff, including a lot of swimming, and I'm pretty pumped for this week. So I come in here in a good mood this morning and excited, but before I get into my message this morning, I do want to just stop and thank all of our volunteers. But first, can we just recognize the volunteers in the room right now, our staff, our guys running sound and media, and our band. Can we just thank them for what they do? And I do want to stop and say thank you to some of you guys, the ones that have rocked my babies. And my current baby, and thank you for making the best coffee in Enid, I think, at any church anyway, we'll say that. Thank you for investing in my teenagers and going to camps and all the different things that you guys have done as people that volunteer and serve here at our church. Man, we appreciate your the way that you have stayed faithful to serve. We appreciate the good attitude that you've had, and our church wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for those of you that serve. And so today we're going to continue in our summer message series, The Adventure. And so if you don't know, if you haven't been around this summer, or maybe you're new today, we've been going through our core values as a church. We have 7 core values. These are the things that shape us and what we do as a church. And so they're really important to us. So we all are just trying to get on the same page this summer with our core values. And so today is value number 5, contributors, not consumers. And so we're going to be talking about giving today, what it looks like to be a giving person. And so a spiritual consumer has an attitude of what can I gain? But a spiritual contributor has an attitude that says, what do I have to give? What can I give? As a pastor, I talk to a lot of people within our church and outside of our church that tell me that they're church shopping. And so they're looking for a church home. And some of the people that I talk to are like, hey, what do you have to offer me? And so I'm going to come to your church if you have something good to offer me. So do you have, and they'll go down the list. And then I have other people that come to me and they're like, hey, I want to be at a church where I can give. So do you guys have any needs at your church? And here's my gifts, here's my talents, my resources, here's what I have to offer. Would that be helpful at your church? And that's 2 different conversations. Both people shopping for a church, one person coming at it from the opportunity of what do I have to give? And the other person's like, you're kind of on, I'm trying you guys out, and so let's see how this goes. And so that's 2 different things completely. One person is coming and saying, hey, I'm looking for a really comfortable place where I can come and consume. And the other person is coming to me and saying, hey, I'm looking for a place where I can contribute. And so the church doesn't exist for us. We are the church, and we exist for the church or for the world around us. Lifeway Research wrote an article on this exact subject, and I wanted to share with you what they found about the differences between spiritual consumers and spiritual contributors. And so here's what they found. They found 5 different things about this subject. Number 1 is consumers are spectators. They're watching, while contributors are participants. Second thing they found is that consumers see themselves as cisterns to store truth, while contributors see themselves as channels to bestow a blessing. So one is trying to get and one is trying to give. The third one is a consumer criticizes everything that doesn't line up with his or her preferences, like, I don't like that song, or, A contributor appreciates what God is doing in the church. Like, what is God doing? And they see that. A consumer, they come to sit and get, while a contributor looks to go and serve. And the last one is a consumer only takes in for themselves, and a contributor pours out to others. So do you guys kind of see what we're talking about this morning? Does this make sense? Within this church, would you have to say that you're a consumer or a contributor? Don't answer that out loud. That might be weird for people around you. But would you have to say, yeah, I'm here and I like what I'm receiving. I appreciate it. But yeah, I'd probably have to say I'm a consumer. Or are you here and you're like, no, I'm here because I know that I have something to offer this church community and this community as a whole. God calls you to serve as his church. If you're taking notes this morning, God calls you to serve as his church. Matthew 5:14, it says, "You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way," listen to this, "in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." What this verse is saying is, be a light in this dark world. Be a light that shines and that points people to our Father in heaven. See, we aren't saved by good works, by what we do. We're saved for good works. God has stuff for us to do. And God can use us to shine his light in this dark world that we all live in. So when we serve and give, it pleases God. Do we see that? When we serve, when we shine our light, it pleases God. When we give, it pleases God. So are you shining your light in your life, in your community, in your home? Are you shining the light of Jesus? Not only does God call you to serve as a church, as this church, his church, God calls you to serve in his church. If you're taking notes, God calls you to serve in his church. Romans 12, it says, "Having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us, let us use them. If prophecy, in proportion to our faith. If service, in our serving. The one who teaches in his teaching, the one who exhorts in his exhortation, the one who contributes in generosity, the one who leads with zeal, the one who does acts of mercy with cheerfulness." So just like a physical body, there's many different parts. There's many different parts to our church family, many different gifts and talents and resources that's you guys. This is our church. And next in this verse, it talks about these, really, if you're taking notes, there's 3 attitudes of serving. So you might write these down. 3 attitudes of serving. If you're going to serve, it's important that you are, number 1, do it not grudgingly, it said. Don't do it grudgingly. So that's like having a bad attitude. Fine, I'll do it. I signed up, I guess I will. Or number 2, not in a lazy way. So that's like, I'm doing it, but my heart isn't here, and I'm going to barely do it because honestly, I don't really care that much. Number 3 is with cheerfulness. That's obvious, guys. When someone has a good attitude and they're serving, and it's not grudgingly, it's not lazy, and it's with cheerfulness, you can see that. It's pretty easy to see. So if you're serving, how are you serving? What's your attitude like? See, your gifts matter to God, and he desires that you use them to share and show Jesus, not only inside of this church, but out in your life, in this community. See, we don't go to church, we are the church. Amen? The church is people, it's you, it's not this building. This morning I want to give you two examples of being a spiritual contributor. The first example I want to give you is Jesus. He's always our example of how to do everything. And the other example is the Macedonian church. Both are good examples to us of how to be contributors. So let's talk about these. First, we'll talk about Jesus and how he is a contributor. I want to give you a little context before I read this verse. Jesus had just encountered the woman at the well and had offered to give her living water. And so he had just got done doing that, and then that will lead us right up to where we're at in John 4:31. It says, "Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, 'Rabbi, eat.' But he said to them, I have food to eat that you don't know anything about. So the disciples said to one another, has anyone brought him something to eat? Like, what is he talking about? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. So the disciples just cared about Jesus, like as a person, and they're like, Jesus, we have not seen you eat anything. And Jesus is like, Jesus, are you hungry? And Jesus takes this as an opportunity to tell what he cares about even more than food. And that is nourishing other people spiritually. He's like, don't worry about me and what I need to eat physically, okay? Don't worry about it. That's not my biggest priority here. My biggest priority is I want to help nourish other people spiritually. That's my food. That's what nourishes me, is when I can nourish somebody else. And, in our me-centered world that we live in, don't we? Jesus is our example of putting other people first. Jesus is always our example. And he put other people first. He put nourishing the needs of other people spiritually above his own physical hunger. He's like, don't worry about it, I'll eat later. This is more important. Are you putting other people first in your life? This is a me-centered world. It is so easy to put ourselves first. I give this example probably too much, but when COVID happened, I became a little bit selfish. I was like, man, I got to make sure my family's okay. When the pandemic happened, I guess is really what I'm trying to say. When everything got crazy, I just want to make sure I had enough toilet paper for the rest of my life and stuff like that. And I kind of went crazy trying to take care of my family, and I forgot about other people. It was real easy to do. Are you putting other people first in your life? Second example here is the Macedonian church. This is a cool story. I like this. In 2 Corinthians 8, it says, for in a severe test of affliction, talking about this church, their abundance of joy and their extreme poverty have overflowed in a wealth of generosity on their part. For they gave according to their means, as I can testify, and beyond their means, of their own accord, begging us earnestly for the favor of taking part in the relief of the saints. And if you're new to church, saints just means other Christian people. Verse 5 says, and this, not as we expected, but they gave themselves first to the Lord, and then by the will of God to us. So what's happening here is this church gave what they had to God, and then they became generous even though they didn't have anything as a church. I'm assuming, because a church is people, I'm assuming that these people that went to this church didn't have very much to give, but they got creative and they gave what they did have. And God, it sounds like God multiplied that. It sounds like God made a way for them to make a difference with what little they had. Give when you have plenty as well as when you don't. Give when you have plenty as well as when you don't. What can you give? What do you have to offer? I want to give you just a few examples of ways that you can give, ways that you can contribute here at Open Door Church. One, the first one I'm going to tell you about, you're doing it right now and you may not even realize it. It's just coming to church. It's attending one of our gatherings. Your presence matters to our church. When you're not here, we notice. We need you here. Sometimes I think, people feel like, well, I come every once in a while. Man, we feel it when you're not here. Your presence makes a difference. So be faithful. Be faithful. We need each other. Second thing that you can do is build relationships. This is a great way to contribute here at our church. Care about some other people. Take some people to lunch. Invite some people over. Talk to people in between services. In the fall, become a part of a small group and invest in somebody else's life. Build relationships. Do you know that we were created for community? We were created for community. We need each other. We're better together. Another way that you can contribute that maybe sometimes goes unsaid, but is huge, is praying for Open Door. Will you pray for our church? Can I tell you this morning, There's a lot that I have to know about sometimes because I'm your pastor. But there's people in our church that their marriages are falling apart. It's not good. There's people in this church that are in the hospital right now fighting for their life. There's people in our church that have lost their job and they have no idea what they're going to do or how they're going to pay for stuff. There's people in our church that are having a very difficult time right now with their adult children and parenting them. There's people in here this morning that are addicted to drugs. They're addicted to drugs, and they're struggling for their life. Okay? So when I ask you to pray for our church, I'm not just saying that. I mean it. Pray for each other. Pray for this community. There's hurting people in this room this morning, guys, and it might be you. Pray for each other. Pray for the lost people. There's people in our neighborhood right here, right around this church that don't know Jesus. And life's not working because they have this huge hole in their heart and in their life. It's Jesus, and they don't have Jesus. Pray for our church. Pray for our staff. I'm telling you, this morning, I woke up and I knew that God had something big for our services. When the air conditioner blew out 5 minutes before the service, I woke up with a summer cold. Why? I have no idea. You know, it's just, you just know. Satan hates what we're doing here. I mean, it's a spiritual war. And if we don't know that, then we've already lost. So pray for Open Door. Another way that you can contribute here is to give financially. Just recognizing that everything that you have comes from God and then giving a portion of that back to the church. And, you know, I would just encourage you, there's a couple ways that you can give. Let me just tell you about those. You may not know. Number one is just to start somewhere. Start by giving somewhere. Start the rhythm of giving. And I'll just tell you, our church wouldn't exist if it wasn't for you guys, for your giving. We could not do what we're doing. We couldn't have our staff. We couldn't keep the lights on. We couldn't do the ministry that we're doing in Enid, in this community. And so begin a rhythm of giving back to God, number one. That would be a good place to start. Number two is tithing. It's just a Bible-based practice of giving 10%. My dad did it growing up, and when I turned 13 and started mowing yards, he kind of told me, hey, this is what we do. As followers of Jesus, we tithe. And so I started doing it when I was 13. I'm 44, and I've never stopped tithing. And I'll tell you, God has always given me everything I need, and honestly blessed me way more than I could ever imagine. He's always taken care. And sometimes it's looked like, how in the world am I going to pay my bills? And then some crazy thing comes along and helps me pay my bills. Or I have to pay it late, but I'm just saying, something's happened. But tithing, another way, and probably like the next level, I would say in some ways, is sacrificial giving. And this is where I'm trying to grow right now. Because there are things above and beyond our tithe. There's needs above that. And so I'm trying to get to the point where I'm giving in different ways outside of our church, ways in our church that are above and beyond normal needs. Those are things like scholarships to camp. Those are things like backpacks. We're trying to raise enough money to get 500 backpacks for this school right across the street for Longfellow. And Justin will talk more about that later, but it's $14 a bag, and we're just trying to help this community. We're trying to help our neighborhood. Stuff like future spaces for us as a church. I think it's pretty obvious we're outgrowing this building, and so at a certain point we're going to have to do something, and I don't know what. And so if you went to our website, there's a spot on there where you can give to future expansion. We don't even know what that looks like right now. We're praying about it. And so faithfully give. That is one way that you can contribute. And the last way that I want to talk about this morning is just serving. There are so many different places that you can serve within our church, using your gifts and your talents and your resources. If that's something that you're interested in or you want to be a part of, come to Pizza with the Pastor. Justin will tell you about it later. It's in a few weeks, and that's where we tell all about our church, and we give you an opportunity to learn and what places that we have to offer as far as it comes to serving. And so come be a part of that if you haven't yet. When we contribute to Open Door, we do it to practice putting God first in everything. That's why we practice serving here at our church, because this isn't the only place that we're supposed to serve. This is the launching pad into the rest of our lives. God wants us to serve, be servants in our home, in our neighborhood, at work, with our families. And this is just a great place to practice that. If I told my kids that this coming Saturday is chore day at our house, and I got up early, got some sticky notes, and I put it on their nightstands, and they woke up and they kind of knew about it, that, hey, this was going to be a day where everybody has one big chore, and that's their responsibility, and it's chore day. We're gonna get this place under control. Summer, it gets crazy around our house, right? It just gets messy, and the laundry piles up, and so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put a sticky note on one of my kids' nightstand. They're going to wake up and see it, and the first sticky note just says, hey, go to the kitchen, and you can do your chore. Go to the kitchen. So they get to the kitchen, and I'm not in there, but you know what is in there? A broom, a mop, dustpan, and I don't need to be in there because it's pretty obvious what they need to do. When they go in the kitchen and they see that stuff, they're like, all right. Pretty obvious what they need to do. Maybe another kid, they wake up and their sticky note says, go outside. And they go out the front door, and outside is our mower, a weed eater, blower. It's pretty obvious what they need to do, right? It's pretty obvious that their job is to mow the yard. Guys, if you want to figure out what God wants from you in your life, a great starting point is to look at the gifts and the talents and the resources that He's given you. That's a great place to start. Just like my kids, if they walk out and see a mower, it's like, okay, let's use this thing. Same thing. In your life, God has blessed you with resources and talents and gifts, and they are to use. God doesn't give you tools so you hoard them up in a tool shed. God gives you tools so you can create something beautiful that's unique to you. God has given us all different gifts and talents and resources that we can use to further the kingdom of God. And I promise you that here at Open Door Church and in your life as a Christian, God has more from you than sitting there and listening to me speak for an hour a week or 30 minutes or whatever it is, and getting a good cup of coffee and going home. There's more. You have something to offer this community. You have something to offer this city. God has uniquely blessed you with some things that He wants you to use. And so that's for right here. That's for right now. That's not for in a month and a year. When I get to it. God has things for you. He has a mission for your life. And He does not want us to be spectators. In 1 Corinthians 10:31, it says, whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Are you doing that? Are you doing everything that you can to give God glory with your life, with your resources, your finances, your gifts, your talents? Are you doing everything you can? Because that's really what God expects from us. So this morning, I just want to ask you, and don't answer out loud. It'll be awkward for everybody. Are you a spiritual contributor or are you a spiritual consumer? Like, just be honest with yourself. Can I just be honest with you? There's times as a pastor where I definitely have more to give. And I get into a consumer mindset because that's the world that I live in. I'm a consumer. And so I bring that same mindset within the church. And that's not okay. I'm here to serve. I'm here to give. And you are too. So would you have to say that you're a spiritual contributor or a consumer? And also I want to ask you, how might God be leading you to contribute here at Open Door Church? Maybe for some it's get in a small group and start caring about some other people in your life in the fall when we kick all those off. Maybe it's, hey, I'm going to start greeting at the door when people come in, make sure people feel welcome. Maybe it's, hey, I'm going to get in the rhythm of giving, of financially helping this church accomplish the mission that God has given us. Maybe it's, you know what, I'm going to make it a point to talk to 2 people every Sunday morning. I'm just going to love on them. I'm just going to ask how I can pray for them. I'm going to intentionally look for people when I get to church. Instead of it being about me and my preferences, I'm going to say, I got something to give here. I care about some people, and I'm going to make sure they know what God might be leading you to this morning. Will you pray with me? And we're going to enter into a time of response this morning. And I want you during this time to just say, God, what do you want? What is my next steps? God, we thank you for this church. We thank you for the values that you've given us. We thank you that you care about every detail of our lives, including what we do with what you've handed us.